and welcome to Viewpoint on Ukraine today. The success of the ongoing reform process in Ukraine requires a comprehensive reform of civil service. This includes strengthening the effectiveness and efficiency of local government bodies. According to EU officials, Ukraine's law on civil service aims to do just that. Joining us now to discuss this and more is Olena Shkrum, Ukrainian MP from the Fatherland Party and one of a number of fresh faces to enter the Ukrainian parliament by the 2014 election. Welcome to Viewpoint.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
So tell us about this civil service reform that you're working on.
Well, basically, this is one of the reforms and one of the bills that was already prepared before I entered the parliament. So it was prepared by the civil society, by the reanimation package of reforms, a famous coalition of civil society organizations, by EU officials, EU experts, and etc., etc. And it was almost ready when I entered the parliament. The idea was to reform the civil society, to reform every ministry, and to reform every civil service in the regions.
So governmental bodies, so local offices,
governmental agencies, the governors in the regions' offices, all of those, enterprises owned by the state where we have the most corruption and the most problems. And the idea was that this should be one of the first reforms because it would actually lead to all of the reforms in the industries. So basically, if, unless you do the reform in the Ministry of Ecology, you will not have, professional people working there. And it comes by to every ministry. But it wasn't as easy as it sounded. So we actually worked with this bill for a year now, and it hasn't passed the second reading. We've passed the first reading, but the second reading is supposed to be this week, or hopefully this Thursday.
And yes, I guess it wouldn't be so easy to reform Ukraine's civil service. I mean, according to global ranking and effectiveness of government institutions, Ukraine ranked 130th out of 144 countries.
Unfortunately,
in 2014.
Unfortunately, you're absolutely right. So the first thing is that our governmental officials, civil servants, are not efficient. So they're not producing reforms. They're very political dependent. They depend on certain political minister who can fire them, can hire them, can do whatever he wants, basically, and comes from the certain political party. Also, they are not very well trained. It comes from the Soviet Union times, and a lot of their functions overlaps. So, for example, we have a number of different governmental bodies and agencies who do the same functions, and the bureaucracy is absolutely horrifying. And of course,
part of the reforming of these civil services is cutting down some of the staff, as I understand.
Yes, but it's not the aim of the reform. So the aim of the reform is actually to do two things. First, to separate political activity from people who will be civil servants, who will be politically neutral, independent, and will not depend on political parties or political quotas. They will not be, relatives to the ministers or relatives to the prime minister or people he liked or went to school with, as it is now, unfortunately. So they will be politically independent. They will be chosen by open competition. And this is like the revolution in Ukrainian politics and Ukrainian history, because they were never chosen. The first political position that was chosen in civil service was the anti-corruption agency, the head of the anti-corruption agency. And now in the bill, we say that every civil servant has to be chosen by open competition.
Right. So a competition and a fair. But what about some of the stumbling blocks that you've been faced with? For example, wages.
Yes, the wages is very important, but the idea is that we have so many civil servants, and you said that we are going to cut down some of them. Obviously, when you open the competition for the best people, you have to evaluate the knowledge of the people who stay there, and you have to cut down the functions that we don't need or the functions that overlaps. So we have right now about 270,000, maybe 260,000 right now of civil servants in Ukraine, and according to my estimations, we can have about 150,000, and that would be it. So we will be cutting down people, and we will be choosing the managing civil service position by open competition. So the people who are there right now, they can win the open competition, but if they don't, they will leave.
Right.
And obviously that's a problem.
I see. Yeah. Ukrainian Prime Minister Yatsenyuk has called for a rise in wages for government employees to stimulate and so on. But how do you think this looks to the public, considering the reputation that government employees have? How do you think the public is going to react to an increase in wages when
Well, obviously we need to increase wages for civil servants. That's no doubt that we need it. But we need to do it for the new civil servants where public is actually trusting them, and I am as an MP in trust with them. Because right now, if we increase wages,
how will the public trust them more?
Well, exactly. If we now increase the wages even in 10 times more than they receive now for 270,000 of people who are from Soviet Union times, who are very much corrupt, who are mistrusted, who never worked properly, this will not change the picture. So we are saying that we need the bill first. We need to reform the functions. We need to get rid of the people we don't need and who are not working. We need to select the best ones, the professional ones, and then we increase the salaries for those professional ones. So in the bill, we have 2 years of this passing period, which is what Poland had, what Latvia had, what Estonia had with the civil service. And then we can increase the salaries.
But Poland and Latvia weren't in the same situation that Ukraine is right now. For example, the poverty rate in Ukraine is expected to reach nearly 32% by the end of 2015. That's according to a UN study. So considering all these factors, is this a good time to increase wages of government employees?
Well, first, if we don't pay for the wages, if people don't pay for increasing the wages, then the corruption will never stop. As an MP, I receive right now $220 a month. And obviously, there are not a lot of MPs who live off this salary. But it will not develop a political elite of MPs if we don't increase salaries for MPs. And that's very obvious for me. If we don't increase salaries for ministers and civil servants, then obviously the corruption will never stop. And of course, there should be very strict sanctions for any corruption cases, because if the corruption develops in millions or even billions of dollars each month, then no salary will be enough. So that's why we need to pass the people through open competition, we need to control them, and we need to set very strict anti-corruption sanctions. But the idea is that also we are asking the EU right now to help us to pay more for the highest positions of the civil servants. And this is what they did in Poland. So in Poland, if I'm not mistaken, they had a year when EU helped with the wages of the highest civil servant positions. And then after a year, these civil servants had to show real reforms, especially in economic area. And then the country took this, from the budget. So this is what we are expecting for 2 years. And Mr. Yatsenyuk is asking, after our bill, that the EU pays certain high positions of the civil servants, which are the governors, the heads of the agencies, of the national agencies, the head of the governmental bodies, the head of the ministers.
So you believe by raising wages of kind of high-level government employees, this will decrease corruption? And in a way, how will this affect people working in low-wage jobs and minimum-paid jobs?
So in our bill, we are saying that we have to increase every wage, and we have to increase the minimum wage. But this cannot be done now. Unfortunately, we don't have this money now in the budget, so it will be done starting from next year and will be finished, the whole plan, in 2019. But to actually have people working from the business, the highest reputable professionals, and to have them working for the highest civil service positions, we need to pay them more now using the European money. And Europeans are ready, as far as I know, to give us this money. But of course, they have to be the open competition basis.
Okay, I see. What's the kind of minimum wage right now in Ukraine?
In Ukraine, the minimum wage is about 1,200 hryvnias, but actually the minimum wage for the civil servant is less. And this is ridiculous because the minimum wage for the civil servant is 900 hryvnias, which is, there is no city in Ukraine where you can live off this salary. That's why we are saying in our bill that it has to be at least 2,700 hryvnias, the minimum wage.
I see. I understand, moving on, I understand you're also working on a bill to resettle and integrate internally displaced people from East Ukraine in other parts of Ukraine. What's the progress in that?
To be very honest with you, there is not much progress. So I was working before coming to the parliament with UNHCR. I was an advocacy expert for the issue of IDPs. Just when internally displaced people appeared in Ukraine, what we were successful enough to do, so right now we have about 1,500,000 IDPs in Ukraine, which is a lot, which by any standards means a humanitarian catastrophe, and we don't have it. So fortunately, because of the work of the government, because of the work of the president, because of the work of UNHCR and other international organizations, we were able to displace those people in Ukraine, to help them with some money, with food, with shelters, with apartments, with land. We were giving, empty houses to them and to help them find jobs. But it's still very, very hard for them to reintegrate into normal life. So basically what my bill does, we are trying to take away those bureaucratic procedures which actually do not help them to register, to find a job, to move to another area if they can't find a job in Kiev, for example. And there are a lot of small bureaucratic things, very corrupt bureaucratic procedures. So we take this away, and this is what the bill was supposed to do.
And when will it be passed?
The bill was passed already,
okay.
But it hasn't been signed by the president yet. And right now I know that the president has some of the possible amendments to the bill, so we will see how it will move on. But it has been passed by the parliament.
Well, good luck with that bill. Hopefully
Thank you.
It will
Thank you.
come into force. Thank you for coming in today.
Thank you so much.
This has been Olena Shkrum. She's a Ukrainian MP from the Fatherland Party. You've been watching Viewpoint on Ukraine Today.